Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be interviewing my friend Steve, who was here in the Philippines for 8 months, stuck because of the pandemic, and now is back in the US. We're going to talk a little bit about culture shock when he came out to the Philippines, and also reverse culture shock when he got back to the US. Stay tuned. Okay, everyone. So I got Steve here, and Steve was living in the Philippines. He got locked down because of the pandemic. So, Steve, just a quick recap. I know you did an interview with Paul already, so we won't go through the whole thing again, but just a quick recap. You originally came out here what month in the Philippines?
Yeah, I got here about January 9th originally, and it was a 3-month planned trip.
So,
It was originally, my thought was a month in the Philippines, a month in Thailand, a month in Vietnam, but
okay,
I enjoyed myself so much in the Philippines that I stayed. And
yeah,
and I was supposed to leave April 7th.
and
That
then
was
you
my
and then you got locked down.
yes. Yeah, the lockdown started to happen about, I don't know, March 15th to the 17th, 18th, that kind of thing. Um, and I was traveling around to many different spots. And what ended up happening is I happened to come back from Siquijor and ended up in Dumaguete, and then the lockdown just shut down. Looking back at it now, I feel very fortunate that's where I was instead of
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Do you if you had to choose a different spot, do you think you would have, or do you think Dumaguete was actually a good spot to be stuck in?
I absolutely think Dumaguete was the best spot for me. I had plans on going to a couple other places, but Dumaguete, it was my second visit there,
Hmm.
and I was only going to spend about 4 or 5 days there after coming back from Siquijor and then planning the next destination. But
Okay.
being stuck there was good because it did have more expats. Like a lot of the things that you mentioned in your videos, it had expats. It had Western spots for restaurants and that kind of thing. Um,
Mhm.
and there was, people like you that I had established a little bit of a friendship with. And so it became a very comfortable place to be. Um, so, and that 3-month trip, as you know, turned it out to be an 8-month trip. So I
Yeah.
was locked down in Dumaguete for 5 months, and I think it was pretty good. Obviously, there were certain frustrations and certain difficulties, but at the same time, uh, being with you and a few others really made it a pleasurable experience because we still did stuff, and
Yeah.
you have somebody to lean on to and share stories with, and frustrations with.
For sure. And just to be specific, you were actually staying in Valencia, and you like that better than Dumaguete, actually.
Yeah, well, when I came back, my first visit in early January, I stayed in Valencia, and then after I came back from Siquijor, I stayed in a Mazi homestay in
Hmm.
Dumaguete. And after the lockdown was coming, I extended my stay for beyond what I originally had planned, another 4 or 5 days, so I could find more permanent accommodations. And I
Sure.
decided to go back up to Valencia. So I really had no intention on my second visit being there. It just ended up being the place that I figured would be where to go for riding it out. And I
Okay.
thought it would be maybe a few weeks because with the landlord, I made arrangements to pay him for 1 month and then week by week after that. So,
Yeah. Well, let's
and
talk. Oh, go
yes.
ahead.
No, I think the landlord was probably pretty happy that I was there to rent the place because it was empty. And
Yeah.
fortunately, the house is where I stayed the first time, and it was empty, so it worked out for both of us.
Perfect. Well, let's talk a little bit about culture shock and also reverse culture shock. A lot of people don't think about that, but people actually have
True.
that. So, how about after 8 months, what were some of the things that you were missing from the US?
Um, uh, well, probably the one thing that was biggest thing that I was missing, and I still haven't done it,
Hmm.
is one of my passions since about 1982 has been flying hang gliders and paragliders, and so I was used to flying at least once a week. I knew when I was going to be gone for 3 months, I was going to see if flying was happening in that part of the world. but I knew I wasn't going to be participating in it. 8 months is a long dry spell, and not doing a hobby, something that you really are passionate about.
Right.
So I missed that. I would say other things that I missed from the U.S., you know, I'd go to the movies on a regular basis, and I didn't do a lot of that in the Philippines because I was so bad. I mean, I was so busy traveling and seeing things. You know, certainly, like a lot of people comment, the food and the diet in the Philippines is different than the U.S. And I was certainly missing some of the mainstay vegetables that I was used to, and some of the dishes that I eat here. But I recognize that I'm going to a different place and a different culture, so you have to kind of go with it,
Sure.
and eat their cuisine.
What was
I had my fair share of rice and dried fish.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What's that?
What was the first thing that you ate, or like one of the first things you really had a craving to eat when you got back to the U.S.? Steak or anything like that, or?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. When I got back, the first thing that I had that I really enjoyed was a chicken bake and a slice of cheese pizza. Because the
Okay.
pizza in the Philippines is there, but it's not the same.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
You know, the cheese, there's a big difference in the cheese. I don't know what the cheese is made of in the Philippines. There's different varieties, or, you know, the different ones that I've had, and I go, that kind of tastes like cheese, but I'm not sure. But it's certainly not cow-based cheese, I think. I don't know, unless you're getting it from one of the foreign stores, you know, that is definitely
Right.
cow-based. In fact, I had a friend, I'm in Northern California, up in Humboldt County, and there's a lot of trees and forest, and you get more of the mold and mildew. I haven't had much of a problem since I've been back, but when I lived here for 15 years prior to going to the Philippines, I needed to have, on a daily basis, a Kleenex box around me a little bit, because I'd have to blow my nose and sinuses when I'd wake up and so on. The Philippines, I had none of that. Breathing was very clear, and I just figured it was hot and humid, and it kept a lot of that at bay. But somebody mentioned when I got back, is because I wasn't eating dairy, that might have been part of my diet that cleared that up. So
True. I've heard that before as well. Yeah.
yes.
What?
So it wasn't a steak or anything like that, because I'm not a really big, heavy meat eater. I'm more of a chicken fish guy.
Okay. What are anything else that you kind of missed? Like when you got back to the U.S., you were just like, oh, thank goodness, or oh, this is nice, that you can think of?
Yeah, I'd say what is nice now is, yes, the travel restrictions here are a lot less than in the Philippines. There are masks that are required to go into stores, and that's about it. You can pretty much come and go as you please. There's no checkpoints. There's no surprises in that regard. Going back to the gym, you know, I can go back to the gym. It's quite light in the gym because a lot of members are staying away. But I'm back in the gym, which is something that I missed. You asked about that. That's something I missed, because in the Philippines, the gym's closed, and of course it's pretty hot. So, you know, going out and walking is how I got my exercise, where now I'm hitting the weights and starting to do the cardio work again, because the medium temperature up here during the day is 60 degrees. So it's a lot cooler. So yeah, it's the travel and being able to go around into the stores. It's a much easier environment here than it was in the Philippines.
Yeah, because, well, here it's still this way. It's getting less, but we are only allowed to go out on certain days, and of course there was the age restriction. If you remember, I think you were turned down at a couple of restaurants a few times because of checking ID, right? So I was saying, in the Philippines, it was a bit more restrictive. You had a pass. You could only go out on certain days to certain stores. And then even they had the age restriction where they checked ID, and you weren't allowed to eat at a restaurant and things like that sometimes, if you remember, huh?
Oh, certainly for me, because I was classified as a senior citizen being over 60. I'm 64, and so that certainly was an issue for me for quite a while until it kind of relaxed because they didn't quite enforce it as strict as they did in the very beginning.
True. So let's talk, the last thing we'll talk about is just kind of reverse culture shock. And I don't think a lot of people think about that, but you spent 8 months in the Philippines. So now that you're back in the US, what are some things that you kind of miss or that you're having a little problem with?
Yeah, the reverse culture shock. I went out and had some meals, and I had an ex-girlfriend that picked me up at the airport, and we went out and had a couple meals, and it was quite surprising. Either I had forgotten or maybe it had gone up a little bit, but the pricing was quite a bit higher.
Yeah.
One of the very first culture shock I probably experienced is I came in San Francisco, and the hotel I stayed at was literally 2 miles from the airport. It's very, very close. And riding the taxi one way was $20. I even said to the taxi guy, as I handed him the $20 bill, I said to the taxi guy, I says, you know, I've been in the Philippines and I rode in a taxi further than what I just did now, and it was like $2. So, and he just looked at me like, what do you, what do you want me to do with that?
So sticker shock is huge. That actually was a thing for me too. Like I went into a 7-Eleven to buy a water, and I'm like, $1? Are you kidding me? You know, and we would buy it for like 20 cents or something. So yeah. So sticker shock. What about friendliness? Because you know, in the Philippines, you walk and everybody's so friendly and everybody's approachable. Do you have that there? Do you feel like, or are you kind of missing that?
Well, I've lived in a lot of places in California, and this is probably one of the friendlier places. It's not like the Philippines by any means. You know, and so culture-wise, I would say that here people talk to each other. You know, people say hi and they say hi back. It's not like Southern California or the Bay Area. You know, I'm in a big county, and it's very laid back, and so it's definitely a much friendlier situation. It's not like the Philippines, because obviously with the Philippines, the Filipinos, and you talk to them and you're getting a smile, and it's certainly more so than it is here, but I don't have that much of a shock coming back here in that regard. But people are busy, they're doing stuff, and there's not as much interaction or an opportunity to talk to people, I would say, like in the Philippines, where it's more accessible for some reason.
Sure. So Steve, do you think in California or where you live, you can approach a 30, 35-year-old beautiful woman and ask her for a date?
No, that's that's not happening. Well, I think you could approach and you could ask, but I don't think you'll be received really well.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never tried that, so I don't know what the looks would what I would get. But I would definitely say that culture-wise, the age gap is not a thing that works really well. My last relationship here, she was 13 years younger than me, and she was from Canada. And it's, you know, that's probably pushing it to a certain degree. So you talk 25, 30 years, that's not happening here for sure.
No. Last thing, we'll wrap it up. When things do open up, do you plan on moving to Southeast Asia, or do you think you will just travel?
Well, as you know, because we talked about it, I came back to take care of some financial stuff, and I've definitely been working on that. I'm well under my way of doing all of those things. I'm going to continue to downsize. I do want to travel. I do want to see other countries that I haven't seen. And so coming back to Southeast Asia, absolutely, is what I want to do. Obviously, like you've discussed, watching some of your videos, it seems like the timeline for that to happen keeps getting extended. And so it's one of those things that you got to play that by ear. But there's no question that I'm going to get a few things in order. I'm going to do some flying, and then I'm going to figure out where I may go. You know, like some of the people have discussed, maybe they've gone, you know, down to South America or Mexico, that kind of thing.
Sure.
You know, staying here is okay for a while, but I'm not going to park myself here and stay here. And especially during the winter, it rains a lot here. And so I definitely am planning on heading south, like you know, like the birds do. So, so I'll come back to Southeast Asia the moment it opens up.
Gotcha. So if Southeast Asia is not open, at some point you think you could head to Mexico or something and wait it out?
Yeah, Mexico, Colombia, you know, one of the countries, because there's a lot that I haven't seen there.
Sure.
You know, I'm more excited probably about maybe Panama or Colombia or something. I haven't been. I've been to Mexico and a number of different places over the years. I've been to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are definitely places there that I'd like to see.
Sure.
But it hasn't really been what I would say a big draw or call for me like Southeast Asia because of the studying that I've done. It just seems like that culture and the lifestyle there is I'd like that, you know, the Asian culture more than the Hispanic culture, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, we've been going a while. I really appreciate you checking in and giving me an update and everything and talking about the culture shock thing. So I think a lot of people don't think about the reverse culture shock, but I think the big thing, like you said, is maybe dating, friendliness, and sticker shock is huge, right?
Yeah, that was big, and getting the ducks in order to leave was a shock, you know. But it all worked out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve, and we'll talk to you soon.